I know that you're afraid. You're afraid of us. You're afraid of change.
Pentagon. The day before 9/11, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld declared war, not on foreign terrorists.
The adversary is closer to home. It's the Pentagon bureaucracy.
He said money wasted by the military poses a serious threat.
In fact, it could be said that it's a matter of life and death.
Rumsfeld promised change, but the next day, the world changed. And in the rush to fund the war on terrorism, the war on waste seems to have been forgotten.
My 03 budget calls for more than $48 billion in new defense spending.
More money for the Pentagon when its own auditors admit the military cannot account for 25% of what it already spends.
According to some estimates, we cannot track $2.3 trillion in transactions.
$2.3 trillion with a T. That's $8,000 for every man, woman, and child in America. To understand how the Pentagon can lose track of trillions, consider the case of one military accountant who tried to find out what happened to a mere $300 million.
We know it's gone, but we don't know what they spent it on.
Jim Minery, a former Marine turned whistleblower, is risking his job by speaking out for the first time about the millions he noticed were missing from one defense agency's balance sheets. Minery tried to follow the money trail, even crisscrossing the country looking for records.
The director looked at me and he says, "Why do you care about this stuff?" It took me aback, you know. My supervisor asked me why I care about doing a good job. So
he was reassigned and says officials then covered up the problem by just writing it off.
They got to cover it up. That's where the corruption comes in. They've got to cover up the fact that they can't do the job.
The Pentagon's Inspector General partially substantiated several of Minery's allegations, but could not prove officials tried to manipulate the financial statements. 20 years ago, Pentagon employee Franklin C. Spinney made headlines exposing what he calls the accounting games. He's still there, and although he does not speak for the Pentagon, he believes the problem has gotten worse.
Those numbers are pie in the sky. The books are cooked routinely year after year after year.
Retired Vice Admiral Jack Shanahan commanded the Navy's Second Fleet the first time Donald Rumsfeld served as Defense Secretary.
With good financial oversight, we could find $48 billion in loose change in that building without having to hit the taxpayers.
In the 2.5 minutes since this report began, the Pentagon has spent nearly $2 million, and it may never know where 25% of those tax dollars went. In Los Angeles, I'm Vince Gonzalez for Eye on America.
Teetering on the knife edge of financial meltdown, the US has always needed to keep a firm hand on the trading of its oil dollars. But in November 2000, the most serious attack on the sacred dollar was about to take place. If left unchecked, it could have been an economic Pearl Harbor. After years of struggling under crippling sanctions, Saddam Hussein decided to use the one WMD that no one had ever looked for or even thought about, the euro.
There was a guy once named Saddam Hussein who said, you know, I'm kind of mad the United States bombing me, and Britain too, so I'm going to sell oil in the euros. Came out and said that in the fall of 2000. It's a big secret here in the United States.
With the mighty dollar's position as the world #1 suddenly under threat, did a ripple of fear go through the Bush administration?
From 2001 to the very beginning of the war, Iraq exported about 3.3 billion barrels of oil. We bought 2.5 of those billion. We bought 2/3 of the oil, but we had to pay in euros. We couldn't have the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve cannot print euros. So we have to sell GMs to Europe to get the euros, or whatever we sell to Europe for goods and services in order to get the euros to buy the oil from Iraq. So the petrodollar recycling system began to break down.
So according to this theory, Saddam Hussein signed his own death warrant. President Bush had no choice if he wanted to save his country. He quickly placed Iraq on his list of axis of evil nations. And with invasion plans already in place, the inevitable soon happened.
I think the decision by Saddam Hussein to go for a petro-euro was the last straw. They had to move because the economy was threatened. And this is what you need to look at, the whole aspect of Middle Eastern oil. The economies of Europe, the economies of the United States, and the economy of Britain were threatened by Saddam Hussein's decisions.
With the Iraqi oil industry firmly under US control, there was just one final task left to do to complete the conspiracy and save the dollar.
The other big secret is the first thing the Bush administration did when they took over Iraq in May of 2003 was immediately reconvert Iraq's oil transactions from the euro back to the dollar, even though from an economic perspective it was in Iraq's favor because the euro was worth about 17% more than the dollar. So he basically wiped out 17% of their entire profits by going back to the dollar.
While all this was happening, the American public was given very little information about how important oil and the petrodollars were to the US. So was there also a media conspiracy?
Absolutely. Was there a media conspiracy? Absolutely. But you have to understand how the media works in Washington. If you go against this administration, they pull your credentials tomorrow. There are some of the leading reporters have been told, you're asking the president too many hard questions. And they've been said, if you don't stop asking these hard questions, you will have your credentials pulled. If you get your credentials pulled, you don't go to press conference in the White House.
The reporters know the rules. Even those who are sympathetic and who understand the truth and the reality also recognize that should they try to project the voice or allow the voice of those who have the position not of the loyal opposition to the empire, but those who really are exposing the empire, that they will be silenced themselves.
Re-elected for a second term of office, George W. Bush seems intent on staying in Iraq and keeping control of the country's oil. The petrodollar appears to be safe, but one other country has dared challenge the US control of the black gold. After years of denouncing America as the spawn of Satan, Iran has announced that in 2006 it will set up its own oil trading exchange that could threaten the exchanges of London and New York. Worse news for Bush and his all-conquering dollar is that Iran intends to invite all of the world's oil producers to trade their oil in euros. The same scenario that happened in Iraq is beginning to repeat itself.
I'm afraid it's deja vu. This is what we've done with Iraq. Guess what? They are up for a big surprise. Iran is unlike Iraq. Population-wise, Iran is more than double Iraq. As far as the terrain and the territory, it's a harsher country. You know, it's mountainous, resistance could be incredible.
They were hoping that the invasion of Iraq would send a message to other countries that are contemplating going off the dollar standard. You know, that obviously hasn't worked out the way they intended it to. So it remains to be seen how far they're prepared to go in order to protect dollar hegemony.
And the unthinkable is already starting to happen. Saudi Arabia, which has the world's largest oil reserves, is showing an interest in switching its oil trades into euros. If Saudi Arabia makes the switch to euros, all other oil-producing countries will follow suit. Is the US going to let this happen? Is America going to stand by and let countries switch to euros, so America then loses its place as the world's superpower and loses all the money it gets in petrodollars? And if not, how far is the US going to go to stay number one?
We could look upon the invasion of Iraq as a good thing. On the other hand, we could look at the beginning of World War III.
Hi.
Hello.
There are people who've lost loved ones in conflicts around the world, in Iraq, Afghanistan, Lebanon.
France?
No, there's no war in France.
Really?
No.
Well, we need to fix that.
Anyway, to all those who've lost loved ones in these wars, which, you know...
We didn't start.
We'd like to say...
Go fuck yourselves! Are you gonna kiss me now?
Wait till they've gone. Okay.
You have the worst teeth I've ever seen in a man.